As we near the conclusion of Season 1, it is time to reflect upon the various battles and conflicts we have explored throughout our journey so far across the European theatre. Our examination of these ancient conflicts has encompassed a diverse range of hostilities between cities, city-states, and indigenous tribes of the ancient European continent. However, as we progress into the latter half of the 6th century and beyond, we will soon encounter a significant impact of outside forces from beyond the European borders, as they are starting to exert their influence upon the region. Thus far, our voyage through the timeless legacy of history has focused primarily upon the birthplace of Western civilization in both ancient Greece and ancient Italy, and the seminal conflicts of Rome, the Latin League, Sparta, and Messenia, among others. While the majority of the earliest recorded battles seem to have transpired in these two cultural epicenters, it is within the lush forests of modern-day Germany where we discovered evidence of what may have been one of the earliest battles to occur on the European continent. While written records of this time period may have never been created or are now lost or destroyed, the remains of fallen soldiers still offer glimpses into these brutal confrontations. Before we cover the 15 oldest battlefields that have been mentioned by historians throughout the centuries, let us proceed once more with a short prologue. Amid the rolling hills and fertile fields some thousands of years ago lived an indigenous community of farmers and settlers. They inhabit a place that we know today as Talheim in modern-day Germany. One day, as they went about their daily routines, a vigilant townsman spotted a large group of unknown men gathering on the horizon. A horde of armed warriors from a neighboring tribe started to charge towards them. Before anyone really understood what was happening, a very chaotic skirmish was already taking place. Amid the turmoil and confusion, some of the townspeople attempted to escape, while others attempted to defend their homes and fight off the invaders. However, the local residents eventually started to lose ground and the invaders successfully infiltrated the village. Only a few young women were spared and taken as hostages, while the rest of the inhabitants were struck down during the battle. The lack of written records makes it difficult to determine the exact events that took place during the battle, and much of the information is based on speculation and personal interpretations. As we now move on, there is one more part of the prologue that covers another battle in Germany. The sheer scale of this archaeological find did provide some more evidence on major conflicts that took place within the ancient history of Europe. The battle at the Tollens Valley was previously thought to be improbable in Europe during this era, with larger scale battles more commonly associated with the Middle East and Northern Africa. However, with the sheer number of bones found within this area, it was concluded that it must be representing the conclusion of what was a clash between two or more tribes living in the western part of ancient Europe. It is possible that the invading army was comprised of members from various groups or tribes, led by some highly regarded local leaders. The presence of Bronze Age weapons, as evident by the remains found within the area, supports the idea that the invading force was equipped with these more advanced weapons. It is the side of the defenders that may have had a different story. The discovery of the remains of women and children in various areas of the battlefield suggests that the defenders were long-time residents of this part of the land, and doing so for generations. The inhabitants were probably the descendants of the people that built the causeway. Furthermore, some of the other weaponry that was found resembled much more of that of Stone Age weapons, or at least weapons inferior to those of the invaders. This would coincide with the causeway dating back at least 500 years before the battle took place. It is possible that a large community had settled in the area for many years. The remnants of the causeway suggest that at its peak it spanned the entire valley, indicating a substantial population living in one community who had taken the time to construct such a massive structure. However, the fact that they may have not been as technologically advanced as the invaders likely resulted in an unequal battle in favor of the conquerors. With the prologue coming to an end, it is now time to leave this woodland area where an extensive history of the ancient battlefields of Western Europe might still be buried underground. We now move further south to what we know today as Italy and Greece. For battle number 15 on our list, we return to the starting point of our journey in episode 1 and the founding of Rome. Although the origins of Rome are shrouded in myths and legends, it's intriguing to examine the battles that may have taken place, at least according to accounts that are still available. One such battle is thought to have occurred when the first king of Rome, Romulus, attempted to extend the city's influence. Skirmishes broke out between Rome and its neighbor Fidenae, and ultimately resulted in the Roman army setting out to invade the latter. When they arrived at the city of Fidenae, Romulus set up camp about 2 kilometers from the city gates, far enough away that the local guards could not see what was happening. The plan was to catch the defenders off guard by making them believe that they had an advantage over the Romans. The army was then divided into 2 groups. The first group, the main army, would attack the city gates head-on, while the second group would move unnoticed through the thickets towards the city. As Romulus approached the city gates with the bulk of his army, he even managed to give the impression of disarray amongst his troops, causing the defenders to open the gates and charge outside, with it negating the possibility of a Roman siege. As the 2 sides clashed into battle, a signal was given to the second contingent of Romulus's army, which then appeared as if from out of nowhere, and overwhelmed the Fidenates. The defenders were soon retreating back into the city, but the Romans were so close behind that the city gates could not be closed in time, and the Roman army quickly took control of Fidenae. Under the command of Romulus, Rome would later also get into conflict with the army of Veii. In addition, the Romans would successfully defend against an invasion of their city by the Sabine peoples. During this era, as the Romans were embroiled in skirmishes with their neighbors, the situation on the Greek mainland was becoming increasingly more tense. Around the year 743 BCE, Sparta sought to expand its territories, and in doing so used the recent skirmishes with their neighboring city-state of Messenia as an excuse to invade the latter. The first battle in this conflict turned out to be a very one-sided one, whereby the army of Sparta used the cover of darkness to raid the town of Amphia, just across the border into Messenian territory. Oblivious to what was going on, the people of Amphia only realized the direness of the situation when the Spartans entered their homes and started attacking everyone in sight. The inhabitants of the city soon needed to flee for their lives. Anyone who didn't get away either didn't survive that night or was sold into slavery by the Spartans. After this relatively easy victory, it was decided that the town of Amphia was to be turned into a garrison. From this new base of operations, the Spartans planned for further campaigning into the territory of Messenia. For the next 4 years, not much would happen besides the Spartans raiding the local countryside of Messenia. It is the year 739 BCE that Eupheius, king of Messenia, decides that he is ready for a direct confrontation with the Spartans, and preparations for battle are made. It is now the year 738 BCE when the Messenians meet the Spartans on the field of battle. Tension is rising ever higher as the soldiers on both sides start to pick their target. Then the banging sound of steel weaponry fills the otherwise so peaceful countryside. From the moment the battle lines clashed into each other, it clearly showed that the Spartans are the more experienced of the 2 armies. Between the Messenians and the Spartans, it is the latter that is fighting with more discipline, the characteristics of a people always ready for war. Although historians debate whether or not the Spartans were truly the formidable fighting force they are often portrayed to be, in this instance they demonstrated their discipline and battle readiness by easily holding their ground against the Messenians. The Spartans maintained a tight battle formation, trying to make the Messenian army loosen up so that individual soldiers could be singled out and gradually defeated. One by one, the Messenian soldiers fell as the Spartans pushed them back. The unrelenting pressure eventually became too much, causing the remaining soldiers to flee back into the Messenian countryside. This war between Sparta and Messenia, which would later become known as the First Messenian War, would finally culminate at the Battle of Mount Ithome. During the initial siege of the city, the Spartans were successful in striking down the king of Messenia, but were unable to fully conquer the stronghold. This provided an opportunity for the Messenians to appoint Aristodemus as their new leader, who then launched a counterattack on the Spartans. This surprise counterattack caught the Spartans off guard, but they still managed to maintain the siege. Finally, the Spartans decided that a prolonging of the siege of Ithome was useless, and then decided to turn to the Oracle of Delphi for guidance. The willingness of the Oracle to assist the Spartans made the Messenians lose the last bit of hope that remained. They began to flee from the mountain, causing their defenses to weaken with each passing moment. In the end, Aristodemus felt that his sacrifice was in vain and took his own life at the gravesite of his daughter. With the loss of their leader, Messenia now fell into the hands of the Spartans. During the ongoing clash between Messenia and Sparta, a broader conflict arose across ancient Greece. Its source could be traced back to the rivalry between Chalkis and Eretria, two city-states located on the island of Euboea. Although several influential city-states took sides in this conflict, it never escalated into an all-out war across ancient Greece. Instead, allies from either Chalkis or Eretria primarily engaged in battles within their own territories, which can be considered a result of choosing a side in the Levantine War. The conflict between Chalkis and Eretria would end up being resolved on a battlefield situated in the middle between both cities. The signal that started the battle was given simultaneously by both sides. Soldiers from Chalkis and Eretria started marching towards each other in a tight battle formation, with either side believing that they fought for what was rightfully theirs. The lack of ranged units was not by coincidence. It was not uncommon for such battles to be fought in melee combat only, as these Greek warriors believed it was more honorable that way, instead of trying to kill your opponent from afar. As the infantry on both sides fiercely battled for supremacy, the Eretrian cavalry attempted to shift the outcome of the battle in their favor. Trying with all their might to surround the infantry of Chalkis, it finally seemed that victory was near. In the end though, the smell of victory was short-lived as reinforcements arrived on the battlefield. The Thessalian cavalry had caught the Eretrians completely off guard. With the added pressure of the reinforcements, it became too much for the Eretrian front line to handle. Slowly the tight formation broke apart as the remaining soldiers retreated back to the city. Leaving behind a now divided and fractured Greece, we venture westward once again to return to ancient Rome in the 7th century BCE. During this time, the first king of Rome, Romulus, has passed away and has been succeeded by Numa Pompilius, also known as the King of Peace. As a result, there were therefore few significant battles to talk about during Numa's reign. However, this peaceful era would come to an abrupt end with the ascension of Tullus Hostilius, the third king of Rome, in 673 BCE. Under Tullus' leadership, the Roman soldiers once again took to the battlefield. Subsequently, it didn't take Tullus very long before he got into a conflict with the neighboring city of Alba Longa. Tullus initially managed to move his army unnoticed past the Albans laying siege to Rome, trying to make his way to Alba Longa. This didn't work in the end as the Albans realized what was happening. As a result, both armies now met on an open plain somewhere between both cities. An envoy was sent to Tullus requesting negotiations to be held between the two sides. As the armies on either side prepared for a confrontation, it was Tullus and Metius who met in the middle of what was expected to soon be the field of battle. However, the Albans made it clear that they had different intentions. Metius pointed out that if the battle resulted in substantial losses on both sides, the neighboring Etruscan cities would probably take advantage of the situation. As a result, it was agreed that both armies would provide their 3 finest champions to engage in single combat. The first 2 Roman warriors fell to the sword of the Alban champion. It was the last Roman soldier by the name of Publius Horatius who managed in heroic fashion to defeat not only the first, but all 3 Alban champions and win victory for Rome. This resulted in Alba Longa now becoming a vassal of Rome. During this ongoing conflict between Alba Longa and Rome, the latter had to invest much of his military resources. This made the Sabine people, who had been living under Rome since Romulus, explore the possibility of breaking free from Roman rule. While the Sabines tried to find allies in their newfound quest against Rome, Tullus got the news of what was happening and he immediately marched into Sabine territory. The addition of the Alban cavalry unit consisting of soldiers who now lived in Rome after the defeat of Alba Longa proved to be a valuable asset for this upcoming battle. The start of the battle was initiated on both sides with the infantry moving forward. It was already quickly showing that the Romans had the upper hand. Tullus now saw an opportunity and ordered a direct cavalry charge, which effectively dealt with the enemy cavalry and rapidly turned the tide of the battle in favor of the Romans. The Sabine infantry, lacking courage to fight on, fled the battlefield, resulting in significant losses as they broke ranks. After Tullus had quelled the Sabine uprising, he immediately had to deal with another one. This time it was Fidenae, who in the meantime had forged an alliance with Veii against Rome. In addition, the upcoming battle would soon turn out to have an unexpected twist. Initially, the Romans and Albans marched forward in unison to confront the 2 Etruscan armies. However, before any fighting could take place, Matthias of Alba Longa kept the promise he had made to the Fidenates and diverted his army away from the battlefield. What transpired next is mostly shrouded in uncertainty, as there are various interpretations of the events that took place during the battle. The first account positions Tullus as the commanding leader of Rome. In this scenario, as a response to the diverting Alban army, he came up with a list to boost the morale of his troops. He announced that the Albans were moving away under his personal instructions. The Fidenates, who had been Rome's vassal for many years and understood Latin, perceived the Albans' movement as a potential double-cross. So even as Matthias was still shifting away his army from the battlefield, the Fidenates panicked and fled back into their city. It was not long before Rome, as the superior force, routed the remaining enemy army of Veii back to their own lands. Another version of the battle has the same outcome, but attributes the Roman victory to their combat superiority rather than Tullus his quick thinking. In this account, the Romans were able to defeat both Etruscan armies, even without the involvement of the Albans. Regardless of the specific details, this battle once more established Rome as the dominant power in this region.